Live, going live. We are live. We are live. All right, we are going to do this thing. We're going to talk about the ghost in black, the
I
woman in
can't
black,
get over
the
how
woman, the
bad you
ghostly
sound right now.
woman.
You sound so sad.
So, Andrew just look at me sometimes and like, God, you really just sound
You're
terrible.
right.
And I'm just like, I
Yes, we're talking about the woman in black, and Andy is almost the man in black. He is podcasting while ill, and
it's
we
always
thought
fun.
we would talk about ghost stories. The
Member
other
pre-show
ghost,
chat.
yeah, member pre-show chat and ghost stories. Hi, members. Um,
Members, here we are.
Now, here's the thing. This is my problem. Like, I try to come up with just straight ghost stories, right? Straight up ghost stories. And it turns out I haven't seen a lot of them because they are my least sort of favorite horror genre.
Is there a reason for that? Is because you feel like it's too real?
It's because I'm scared of the dark. Right. That's exactly it. It is too real. That and then, I had to really push myself on sitting in the dark to get into Home Invasion. Those two are like peak. And I've tried. I've watched some ghost stories, and it turns out I'm actually okay with them now that I've kind of started watching horror movies again over the last now many years. But as it happens, I just haven't seen very many of them. I don't have a good catalog. So I look at this list of ghost stories that come highly recommended, and I've seen so few of them. So I need an education. So what I feel like is I'm going to tell you some of the things that I've seen that I feel like count as ghost stories, and you're going to build me a watch list. That's what we're going to do today. Did you know that you were going to have that responsibility?
I'm thrilled because I love ghost stories. And
Excellent.
if I ever get to guest on Sitting in the Dark, I'm going to bring you ghost stories because
Do you
that's
know?
something I
You
really
know
enjoy
it.
talking about.
You say that as if you've somehow been barred from sitting in the dark.
If I ever get the invite in the
You're
mail.
you're Jiminy. You're welcome anytime, man.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no,
All right.
I always have loved ghost stories from when I was young, and so
Mhm.
yeah, there are a lot of good ones. There are a lot. There are a lot. They're not all good, but there are still a good
Right.
number of really enjoyable ones.
And I've seen some as a result of you telling me to go watch some. I think over the past, and I'll just tell you, I've seen Sinister, some activity going on there.
Would you
We
call that a
just
ghost? I don't think the Bagul is a ghost. I think it was like a.
You don't think the kids are ghosts?
Oh, the kids are ghosts. Yes, the kids are ghosts.
Okay, yeah,
You're
the
right.
Bagul is something different.
I was thinking like the villain, but yes, there are
Yeah,
ghosts in
all
Sinister.
right, ghosts are present.
Yes.
I've seen The Ring, I've seen the others, and I've seen Crimson Peak.
The ring. I guess that is kind of a ghost. Okay, you're okay. Crimson
What?
Peak. Wow, I forgot
That
that
was a
film
movie?
existed. Yeah,
Yeah. No,
I
I
just
didn't.
disliked
I
it so
didn't.
much.
Yeah, didn't love it. And I've seen the others, which I did. I thought was a very good film.
Okay, it
Are
is a
you
very good film.
are you still here?
Yes.
And I've seen all the Conjuring movies because we did one of them on the film board a ways back, and so I did get through the Conjuring. But beyond that, like I think, Sixth Sense. Does that count?
That definitely counts.
Okay, I've seen that. So I don't
You're
know. I
like
mean,
you're
maybe I've seen
becoming
more,
Steve
and I'm
Martin in
coming
the
at them
jerk, and this one
right.
too.
And
But
I
that's
have this
all.
lamp, this table lamp, and that's all I need. Okay, now I'm going to stop talking because I feel like those are of middling to fair, you know, experiences. Ugh, dang it! I'm Steve Martining again. Haunting of Hill House. The because we did those on Sitting in the Dark, so that counts. All right, now
You
you
are
tell
saying
me.
so many ghost films.
Yeah,
Maybe some of
now
those were on my list.
I
Was
totally
that your
forgot.
entire? Did you just
I
go through an
totally
entire
forgot
list?
that was the part of that. That's what we do here. I just completely forgot it. I was so excited to show off a little bit that I have seen some ghost stories, but now I'm done. Now that's all. I'm going to stop talking. In fact,
So
I'm just going to mute myself for the rest
did
of
you?
this segment.
Is that your entire? Were those your list, or do you have
No,
other
in
ghosts?
in fact, I have more that I haven't seen
Okay, good. Oh,
that
that
are
you haven't
on a
seen,
list.
but that
Right.
was essentially your list of ghost stories that you've seen.
I have now given it to you.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
Well, for
because
my
this
first,
is yeah.
yeah,
It's not even first. Just all of them. Give them. Just vomit them
just
out.
throw them out
Yeah.
there.
Let's see. What do you want
All
me to
right.
do?
The first one
Number
I'm
one.
going to go with is Ty West, who I mean I know recently you kind of partook in the first two of his trilogy with X and Maxine,
Yes.
and gearing
And I
up
watched
for
the
or no
trailer
sorry
60 times.
X and Pearl gearing up for
And
Maxine.
Pearl. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, Ty West back in 2011, right around the time that the film that we're talking about today, The Woman in Black, was released. This film, The Innkeepers, came out, and Ty West, I think early on proved himself a solid horror filmmaker. And The Innkeepers is a really creepy one about two young employees at this creepy old inn. I have to do this with a cough drop.
I'm looking at the artwork on Letterboxd for The Innkeepers, and it looks like the promo shot for like a Doctor Who episode.
It's I mean it's low budget, but it's creepy, and it's basically these two employees. It's the last weekend of this place in operation. It's getting ready to close down, and they decide, you know what, before this place closes, this is our last chance. We're going to film some of all the creepy stuff that happens around this place. They love ghost hunting. They love this whole idea, and so they start doing stuff to kind of provoke the spirits to kind of come out, and so they can capture it on film and everything. And let's just say it doesn't go well, and it's a fun, creepy film. Definitely worth checking out. The Innkeepers.
Added it to my watch list, and you can see the hijinks. He definitely has like a boom microphone. They're trying to capture. He must be a podcaster.
They're doing everything they can. Yes. Oh, all right.
And Sarah Paxton is in it, and I love Sarah Paxton. She was in Barbarian, which was not really a ghost story, but a great movie.
Super creepy. Yeah.
Super creepy. All right, what else you got?
This is a more for fun sort of ghost story, and of course features one of our favorite people, Dee Wallace, and Michael J. Fox. It's Peter Jackson's The Frighteners, which people seem to kind of forget existed as one of his films, but it's a fun little ghost story film that features Michael J. Fox as somebody. He's total like a total hoodlum as far as what he does. Like, he basically has all of these ghosts as his friends. They go around and create situations where they're haunting houses, and he's like a ghostbuster. These people pay him to get rid of the ghosts, and he works his deal out with his ghost friends. But then, of course, a real ghost happens to come along that's actually starting to kill people, and he's got to actually now, he and his ghost friends have to figure out how to actually deal with this. Lots of fun.
Jake Busey.
Have you seen that one?
No, of course. No, I haven't seen it. I know. And it's fun even. I'm adding, you're just telling me movies to add to my watch list right now.
Very fun list. Very fun movie. Very fun movie.
All right.
Okay. Back in...
We're doing great.
Oh my
Are you okay to do this, really? I mean, is
am,
it safe? Is it
Totally
safe?
back in 1981, a really interesting ghost film. Really interesting ghost film that is just called A Ghost Story, and it's actually interesting because it's got Fred Astaire, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Melvin Douglas, John Houseman as these four old men who get together in this. They're in like a little group. They call themselves the Chowder Society, and they get together to tell ghost stories, and all of it centers around the death of this woman that happened ages ago. But as the story progresses, I don't want to spoil anything because how all of it ends up kind of tying together becomes very interesting. And I think it was like the last film for Douglas Fairbanks Jr., maybe also Fred Astaire. Creepy little film, definitely worth checking out. A Ghost Story, or it might just be Ghost Story. Yeah,
it is Ghost Story, and it's based on Peter Straub's book.
Right. Yeah. I've never read it.
I did not know that either.
It was a ghost film I watched when I was young that always stuck with me.
Okay.
All right, I
Can
have
I,
two
I'm gonna
more.
I want to interject one that is I don't that is not a necessarily a ghost story, but when you talk about telling stories, this one jumps to mind, which is I think I've talked about it. 1986, Gothic, a Ken Russell film. Have you seen this?
I've not.
Gabriel Byrne, Julian Sands, Natasha Richardson. It is the story of Lord Byron being visited by Percy and Mary Shelley, and they spend the weekend taking drugs and telling each other the scariest stories that they can. And there are some hallucinogenic, paranormal adjacent experiences in that movie, and I really enjoyed it. But it's been a long time since I've seen it, so
Hmm.
your mileage may vary, but I put that on the list. Okay,
Interesting.
now
Okay.
your turn. Give me another 6.
Oh Jesus. How about two more?
Okay.
Will that work?
Yes, I'll
So
take
all
2.
right. So one is a film that I I don't know how it holds up by today's standards, but when I was young, I watched a movie called Lady in White. Lucas Haas is in it, and it takes place in the 60s, and he, like the other school kids, lock him into the coat room at school at the end of the day, and he's trapped in it like over the
Oh,
it's
I hate it.
Halloween evening, and this young girl appears and gets killed, although he can't see who kills her. And so then it's this whole journey for him to try to figure out, who killed this, because he starts seeing this lady in white wandering around, and it's really creepy. Lucas Haas, I don't know, as a kid, he was one of those other kid actors that I identified
Yeah.
with quite a bit. And I just really enjoyed the story of him trying to figure out what happened to this little girl in the coat room. So, yeah.
Locking the
Good.
kid in the closet. I don't care for that either. Okay.
No. Yeah, right. It's
All right.
it's creepy. But it's one that I'm like, was it more designed for kids? Like, I'm curious to
Yeah.
watch it again just to see, does it work for me as an adult now?
Right. Okay. Lady in
Last
White.
last but not least is really interesting film that's super creepy. It's not a gory film, but it's a very psychologically creepy one. It's called Session 9, and it's a very independent film, and it's a cleanup crew that has been sent to clean up this old mental asylum, and one of the workers discovers this box of old audio tapes, and he starts listening to it as he's cleaning, and listening to like a patient as they're dealing, and each tape is a different session, hence the Session 9. And so he's listening to these tapes, and this patient has dissociative identity disorder, and just it gets darker and darker as he kind of works through the tapes, and creepy things happening in this old abandoned mental asylum. Really great film, very creepy.
Oof.
Completely flew under radar, but absolutely worth checking out.
Okay. It's on the watch list. Now, can I turn the tables on you, sir? I want to
Sure.
ask you about movies I haven't seen and make sure that they should be or should not be on my list. One, J.A. Bayona's The Orphanage, 2007.
Yes.
Where do you stand? Yes, that's
Really,
good.
it's a very creepy, really interesting film. It's one that I've been meaning to revisit, because I like Bayona, and that was a film that I don't know. In my head, I kind of pair that with the what is the Guillermo del Toro one that about the kid, the ghost kid in that one, because that's another creepy one. I have to look now. Hell's Bells. What is it? The Devil's Backbone.
Okay.
Yeah,
Haven't
yeah.
seen that. That was actually on my list of things to ask you about.
Oh, that one. And I don't know. In my head, because maybe it's just because they're both Spanish horror
Yeah.
ghost stories, but they both are incredibly effective and very creepy. Good ones
Okay.
to good. That'd be a fun double feature.
Stir of Echoes, 1999, Kevin Bacon.
I enjoyed it. I didn't love it, but
Okay.
I do think it's a very effective film.
Okay. You just did, this is based on two of your very recent life events. One, you did a Stephen King watch through, right? 1408, John Cusack.
I am still working on all of my Stephen King.
Okay.
1408 is one I saw in theaters. I haven't actually gotten to the story yet, so I can't speak to that one.
Okay.
But I don't remember liking the film as much. I'm curious to actually get to the actual story and read it to see what I think in comparison, and then revisit the movie.
Last, only because you got me thinking about it, I ran across Lake Mungo from 2008, which sounds like it belongs in your Ozploitation series, even though I recognize it doesn't quite fit. But it is an Australian psychological horror film that is also shot in a mockumentary format.
Right.
And I've never seen it. Have you?
It's one that I forgot. I started it and I fell asleep and kind of forgot that I was watching it. And
Does not bode
so
well.
I definitely, well, I fall asleep to a lot of movies, good or bad. So that's not a good thing. But it's one that I keep meaning to return to because I also have heard some positive things about that one.
Outstanding. Well, so now I have a significant watch list of paranormal movies, of ghost stories.
Yes,
and
you do.
we're going to talk about The Woman in Black.
Let's talk about this one.
Okay, deep breath, deep breath. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the next reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
The Woman in Black is over. Even the most rational mind can play tricks in the dark. The Woman in Black, Andy. Oh, she's so scary.
She is a scary lady for sure. She's definitely she's here to provide the ghostly chills, right?
Such ghostly chills. That's exactly why she's here. And this is also, I think, was this a turning point movie for Danny Ratz, as I call him? Danny Ratcliffe? Danny Ratz? That's another shirt we should do, is like mafia nicknames for famous actors who don't have mafia nicknames.
That is pretty funny.
Yeah.
But to your point, I think that there's an interesting sense of him as an actor breaking free of the Harry Potter mold that he had been doing. This was really the first thing. I mean, he did December Boys in the middle of his run of all the Harry Potter films, but this is his first film post Harry Potter, and also really kind of, albeit he's got the very end of Deathly Hallows Part 2 where he's playing an adult, but this one is like he's actually playing an adult for real, the real Radcliffe. And so I remember when this did come out that there was quite a bit of praise for him that, oh, look, he's working to break free of the Harry Potter mold, and he's doing a pretty good job with it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can already tell he's making interesting choices. Like this feels interesting, even though it takes place in, in a universe that sort of is reminiscent of, the wizarding world of Harry Potter. And it's a movie that also ends in a white train station, which I think was really funny. Where's Dumbledore?
That's funny.
Anyway, but it is just a showcase of this guy who started making some fascinating choices that really allowed him to kind of shake the yoke of Harry Potter in a really positive and interesting way, like compelling way, and so this was it. It takes a bit to to adjust to him playing an adult attorney in this movie. He still looks very young. He's got the sort of Leonardo DiCaprio curse. But eventually I got there, and I felt like he totally fit the mold for me. I thought he ended up being a aces in this movie. I thought he was interesting to watch.
Yeah, I think that he's bringing a youthful sense to the character that works well. He's a very young solicitor in the UK, and he's this story takes place in generally 1910. At the very beginning, during the credits, we're seeing stuff that took place a few years beforehand in 1906 when his wife died in childbirth. and they got married, and his wife died, and so we're kind of getting a sense of their kind of his grief, and as a young man, and I think that was an interesting thing for him to play. I mean, he certainly had his share of grief that he had to deal with over the course of Harry Potter. I mean, his parents died at the hands of Dumbledore when he was,
They
or not
never
Dumbledore,
let you
Voldemort.
forget it.
Yeah,
They
right.
never
So-
let you forget.
so he's pretty much carrying that grief through that entire thing. But here it's like a different grief. It's like I did feel like it's that grief that you feel when you're on your own and you have a wife and suddenly that person is taken from you. And it
Yeah.
it felt like this is a person who is on his own trying to figure out how to navigate the sadness that is kind of so pervasive in his life. And that's a challenge for him, and I think that he brings a lot to that. And I actually bought him as a parent too, like a young parent. Like, I know sometimes you look at these kid actors or child performers, and then suddenly it's like they're playing a person who has kids, and you're like, really? But like, he worked really well in that mold. I thought he fit really nicely in that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought so too. It was exactly fine. He wasn't bad. It did what it needed to do for the movie's reputation. I think probably people saw it out of curiosity, in addition to being interested in ghost stories, like curiosity as to, here's this incredibly well-known global name, and doing something that isn't tied to Harry Potter is an act of curiosity. And so I thought it was great. What do you think of the movie overall? You had seen this one before, right?
I have not. This was
Oh, you
first
had
time
not.
for
This
me.
was the first time. Okay. Give me a sense of your take on this as a ghost story. How does it work for you?
Well, I mean, I think it works well as a ghost story. I think there's definitely a conversation to be had in a bit about kind of the source material of this and
Yeah.
its place in kind of English culture and everything. But I think as far as a ghost story, a lot of ghost stories deal with something like this, where there is something tragic had happened years beforehand in this particular place, and whoever it is who's here now, whether it's a house or a nearby marsh or whatever it is kind of like they are now in a situation where they're dealing with this malevolent spirit that has kind of lingered and is now causing issues. And now this person is like, well, now I've got to help figure out what the problems are and see if we can help that whatever that spirit come to terms with what happened and find peace. And that's generally the journey a lot of people in some of these ghost stories go through. What happened? How can I help them? And will that
We've got to help them move on, right?
Yeah.
Help the unsettled undead, the unsettled dead move
Right.
on, right?
And to that end, I think it works. I think that you could argue, kind of like Sinister, they fall a little heavily on some of the tropes and also on trying to create the jump scares and really amping that up here. That's a big part of this. That being said, James Watkins, who directed this, this is the only thing of his I've seen. He hasn't done a lot of things, but I do think that there's a level of creating the mood and the tone throughout this film that works quite well. But I also I do think there's a little much of writing in the tropes and the jump scares.
Andy, I stand relieved because of that comment. I thought I was crazy. The movie's vibe is awesome. I love the setting, the set pieces. I love the house. I love the idea that it's on this old road where the tide washes the road out twice a day. Like that ticking clock kind of entrapment is exceptional. And the house and the fetishization of candles, like lighting the candles, like making that feel real to me. Like that felt like, okay, it's not just mysterious candles that never burn out. This is a guy who has to keep the candles lit or he can't see. And made it a real sort of narrative point in many of the big set pieces. So the mood is awesome. Using light and dark, using all the house is great. And it's also a lot of house. I felt like it became such a repetitive act of opening doors and building to jump scares and right now of opening doors and building to jump scares that I got a little bit bored of that part of it. I felt like this was a movie that did a lot of setup without enough sort of major horror or ghosty events to actually tell me to actually move the story forward. I got that the crowds people were upset. There were a couple of sequences. The fire I thought was a great and interesting sequence when he's in the basement with the woman in black in the corner and the girl who kills herself with the flame. I thought that was extraordinary and horrific. I like the grief of the townspeople and the mood there. And every time Danny Ratz is in the house, I found myself like by the end, it became a little bit tedious.
Yeah, I mean it's tedious, but I think it still is fun and effective, and that's I think the line that I walked with this film. It's kind of like Sinister on my more recent watch.
Mhm.
It's like I acknowledge that it's doing all of these things, but I'm still able to kind of have fun and just go along for the ride. Like I think they're pushing a few too many buttons, but it's
Yeah.
like they still create an effective character in the woman in black. Like she was creepy when she popped up and everything, and there were some great creepy moments. I in my decision to, or as we were approaching this, I decided that I was going to. I didn't read the book. I was curious to check it out, but I did watch the previous version of it that was made for British television in 1989.
Oh, good.
And then I also just kind of checked out the synopsis of the book. The book, it sounds like it's interesting, and I
Yeah.
think it is worth just kind of comparing how different each of the versions are. The book actually starts with Arthur much later in his life. He's at home with his wife and his 4 stepkids, and they're sharing ghost stories. Everyone asks him to tell one, and he gets mad and leaves the room. And then he decides, I'm going to just write it all down, and he recounts this story. So it's one of those bookended stories.
Epistolary. Yeah. Right.
And then he kind of there. The story is largely the same. He meets Samuel on the train. We get the whole thing with the woman in black and how she appears, and when somebody sees her, a kid dies, and all of that sort of stuff. And it doesn't go so far as to him trying to figure out how to heal her and all of this sort of stuff. This doesn't happen in the book or in the 1989 movie. He just basically tries to finally get away from her, and that's essentially what happens. He finally gets away from the house in the book, and then at the end of in the book, he finishes writing his story. Oh no, sorry, he comes back home to his wife, has a kid, puts it all behind him, and then while he's at a fair, the woman in black shows up. He sees her step in front of the carriage that they're on, and he and his wife and child are killed.
Yeah.
And so that's his ghost story there. In the 1989 version, which for me actually was creepier than the Radcliffe version, and I think it's just because it does actually rely on tone and doesn't necessarily push with the jump scares and everything, but you get a little bit more of the straight story of him arriving and going to the house and everything. And what's interesting in that film, that one takes place in 1925, not 1910. And in order to get power in the house, there's power in the house. He doesn't have to do candles, but he has to go to this shed next door, and it's this hand cranked generator that he has to spin and get it going fast enough to actually pump the energy into the house so that he gets lights. And it allows for a few really great moments with that whole thing, which was fun. But that one does follow a little closer to to the book, I suppose. He finally gets away from the house. He ends up seeing the woman in black comes to see him in his hotel room, and he ends up with this huge fever and finally gets taken home. And then he's out with his family, his wife and his 2 kids, and he sees the woman in black standing in the middle of a lake. And then she walks toward him, and then a huge tree branch crashes off a tree. The whole thing like collapses onto their boat and kills all of them.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it was. I really enjoyed the 1989 version. It was a lot of
Wow.
fun. But it's interesting to see like what they did to amp this one up. As far as like this one, they added the whole motivation. We've got to figure out what Jeanette wants. She wants her kid. Let's find him.
And did you find that part compelling? Because that actually is a thing that worked for me. Like, I know it's a trope, I know it's a ghost story thing, and I felt like the way they did it, the rescue of the boy's body out of the marsh, I thought was really great and horrible. And that he did the work of finding the body and doing the enough of the ceremony. None of that felt overwrought to me by that point in the movie. That was okay.
No, I like the sequence. Like it's great the way it plays out, like having to go under the muck, that just
Mhm.
kind of dark brown muck in the marsh to find the car and pull the body out.
Hmm.
That was fun. Like that was actually super creepy. It made for a scene that worked quite well. I liked the way that it all played out. And then cracking her grave open and putting his body with hers. Like
Yeah.
it made for
How
an
sweet.
interesting sequence. Yeah, right. They add a lot more with this. Like we have those 3 girls at the open that we get to see, like they're playing in their attic room, and then suddenly it's like they're possessed and they decide they're just going to go jump out the window and kill themselves. At the end, we have the girl, or not toward the end, we have the girl whose parents have locked her away in the cellar to keep her away from the woman in black, but then the house catches on fire. You already talked about how he goes down there and sees her, the woman in black, down there, kind of convincing this girl to pour gas or fuel on herself so that she also burns up. Some of that stuff is where I was frustrated with some of the changes here. It felt like they were trying to make her more active in the way that everything was happening with the kids' deaths and everything, and I wasn't so
The
sure
woman
that-
in black, you mean her?
yeah.
Okay.
Weirdly, coming right after Sinister, it just made me kind of laugh as I was watching this. I'm like, my God, she's just the Bagul.
Yeah.
She's like,
She's the Bagul.
she's convincing these kids to do these things, but she's doing nothing. She just stands there the whole time.
But yeah. I mean, she's not doing nothing, right? Aren't we supposed to believe that she has this sort of paranormal control over the kids?
Well, right. And that's just like the Bagul. They all have
Yeah.
some sort of control, but literally all they do as characters is stand there.
That's all they
It's-
do.
it's like a mental
sometimes
control
they
that they-
rush at you with their mouth open. There's a lot of rushing.
There is a lot of that, yes.
Yeah.
There was actually in the 1989 TV version, there was a really creepy moment where she comes at him in the hotel room that I just wasn't expecting. And that did give me shivers. It was pretty fun to see.
Okay.
But I don't know. It's fun. But I can definitely tell it's this period in telling ghost stories where they are really relying on, they're trying to pump the jump scares into the film. And I think it's because largely for appealing to younger audiences, or also the filmmakers just not knowing how to craft a ghost story that allows for the building dread to just kind of come in and overwhelm them, because they just punch you so much with the jump scares that it kind of loses its steam a little bit. But I mean, they're still effective and fun. Like when he's looking out the window and suddenly she's like right behind him. Like there are still some fun
Yes,
moments. in
some
this.
of those were great and super effective. I think for me, it was just it was the presence of so many hallway like shots and doors that were staring at a door that may or may not be open this time, and I just thought that's like it's playing itself, like it's calling its shots too often, and it ends up kind of numbing me to the suspense a little bit. That by the time we have so many jump scares toward the end, by the time we get to her final reckoning, I'm no longer in it to be scared, and I kind of feel like that's the point of these movies, is like to have me on the edge of my seat. But this leads to my final, I think, maybe complaint, but I don't know. I am not settled on how the movie ends. They make a big deal about how she needs to be resolved, and how she needs her son back. And are we to get that Ratcliffe, Danny Ratz, was wrong in his theory that she needed to be resolved by the way the movie ends, or that she has just decided, I'm not going to give up my pettiness? Like, who are we supposed to learn about in the way the movie ends?
Well, and that was an interesting change that isn't apparently in the book. Well, it's definitely not in the book or the 89 film, where they go through the effort of reuniting her with her son. Like, that never happens. And but she continues haunting him, throughout, or all the way through the end in both cases.
Okay, that's interesting.
Not necessarily even at the Eel Marsh house anymore, right? Like, she's followed him wherever he happens to be in London or wherever else in England when she kills him. And that's, I think, an interesting element that certainly taps into the whole line of ghost stories, where we talked about this with Sinister, where it's not the house that's haunted,
it's the person.
It's now the person, or that spirit is so malevolent that they're going to do whatever, and if that means following you, they'll do it. And that's, I think, a very creepy element that you have here, that it does continue from the book, but there is this element of the ghost coming back after we think he's done everything that he should have done in order to give her peace, only to find that it doesn't. And there have been examples, none are coming to mind at the moment, but where they've gone through the process of trying to give the ghost peace, only to find out the ghost is still there. Oh crap, we did the wrong thing. That wasn't the thing that we needed to do. And then they have to figure out this is the right thing to help the ghost actually get peace. That's been, I think, maybe how they had gone before. This one, I don't know. It was an odd switch to the ending that I guess just made the ghost more malevolent. Like, either that, or it's just one of these things. Like, how do you ever really know as a living person what a ghost is after? Like, and for maybe it's just like the thing, like his presumption that he's right. Is that what we're going after? That, like, why should that be the thing? I don't know. I guess there are a few ways you can look at it.
Well, for sure, and I guess I came at it probably way too Doyleist in this watch, because knowing that there is another movie after it, as soon as she shows up on the platform and Danny Ratz and Child are reunited with Mummy, and killed, I thought, oh, they wanted the door open for another movie if this one does well. And that's just super cynical. So it actually is a relief to me that this is a continuation from the book, that she's not resolved in the book. She is an ongoing concern as the book ends. Like, that's fine. That is relief. And it makes the ending, the downer of an ending, that he and his, I guess it's arguable. Is this a better ending, that he and his kid are dead and actually are reunited with their mother? That's an interesting take on the resolution of grief in horror movies, that, lean in, folks. If you just end it all, like, look at the reward. Everything's clean now, and you're reunited with your dead wife. Maybe there's a message in there that I'm don't get yet, but it makes it more interesting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely an element in there about how they chose to find this resolution for him with his grief. Like, he's finally through it and everything. That being said, I was curious about the decision to do that, because we also have all of the ghost children show up and they stare at Samuel across the train yard with the
Yeah.
woman in black, and he sees all of the ghosts there, and he's like, "Oh crap!" And he acknowledges, like he knows that that's probably where um, Arthur and his kid are now. But the fact that they give Arthur essentially the happy ending by allowing him to end up with his wife, I thought was. I was like,
Yeah.
that seems like a studio choice. It seems like it would have been a bolder choice, maybe to have his wife there, and as they go to her, suddenly the woman in black takes them. Because I mean, all the other kids are with the woman in black. Why
Yes.
doesn't she get to keep them too?
Well,
That,
and the woman in black, like when we look at the woman in black, when he's in the dream state, she's not disfigured. She's just veiled, right? Like when he's in the death state, everything seems to be normal and cleaned up. It's only when piercing the veil of death that they appear horror creatures.
yeah.
And maybe that's it. Like maybe her work is done. They're dead, and so she doesn't care anymore.
But why do all the other children like linger around with her and everything? Like,
I don't know.
you
It's
know,
like a
I
real
don't know.
Pied Piper vibe.
Because he sees there is a point when I lose track of like all the trips around the house, but there's a point where he's upstairs and he's looking out the window and he sees the kid out there,
Hmm.
right? Like climbing through the mud or something. And so it's like, I don't know, are they there because they're just reliving their moments? But it's like when she's at the train station, they're all with her. So I guess
They're all with her.
that's a thing. Like I guess I don't. There's not a clear sense as to how all of that's handled, and it's a ghost story. It's it's all loosey goosey anyway. It's not
Yeah,
like they
right.
need any well defined rules, but it does just seem like they're all generally hanging out with the woman in black now. So
Yeah. Which, for me, I think that was fine. I think I still go back to this idea that the movie ends on already on a downer, that the woman in black is unsated, right? She's still not satisfied and she's petty. And they leave Danny Child on an up note. And I think that's my problem. That's a cognitive dissonance that I have yet to resolve. I almost think it would have been more interesting had the woman in black not shown up and they die and end up reunited as an accident. Like it's just like, oops, we tripped in front of a train and now we're dead, but at least we get mom, but the woman in black is gone too. Or they don't end up dead and have to realize that their life is now plagued by the woman in death and the woman in black, and they'll always be looking over their shoulder, kind of a thing.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
if you're going to go dark, let's go ahead and go dark.
Well, that's why I found the other versions to be kind of interesting, because he really feels like he's free. He's back in London. He's hanging with his wife and kids, and they're
Yeah.
off doing things. And then the woman in black shows up later. Like that, I don't know. There was something interesting about that I thought worked quite well. Here, we get, he's doing all of this because he knows his son is on the way up with his nanny, and he's trying to placate the woman in black.
Ticking clock.
Right, before she can kill his kid. And
Mhm.
that's the whole race. Would it have worked better if he got back to London and then got killed?
Maybe.
I don't know, maybe?
Yeah. Because then you get more into what into the I mean, as long as you're going to have a mechanic, then you get more into the mechanic of who's being haunted. And it's not the town being haunted, because with him dying and having the woman in black appear to him at the train station, is that a message that he can't get out, or that she's following him, or that, or that she's haunting the town and he's subject to it as long as he's in the town? But I kind of like the idea of him getting out of the town and having her follow him. Like she's always present.
Yeah.
Now that he is engaged with her.
This is kind of like, well, it's like any ghost story. It's like, I was going to say sinister, but any of these stories where you have very particular mechanics that go into this whole thing. And the whole story of the woman in black is she's largely not around this town of Crith and Gifford, where we're at for the bulk of the film. But if somebody sees her, whoever it may be, a child is going to die.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially the mechanic of the film. Why is this the plan that the woman in black has put forth? Why does she require somebody to see her in order to then go take a kid? Like, it's not it's not ever fully explained. I mean, we kind of get this sense of her grief. You know, there is this story. We find out her name is Jeanette Humphrey. She was the sister of the Alice Drablow, who owned this house and who just died, and that's the whole reason that Arthur is here, to kind of go through her belongings and paperwork and everything. But Jeanette had a kid out of well, she was single, a kid, and her sister and her husband, or her sister and her husband took the kid away, because, and then essentially like put her in a mental institution for like a year, because they didn't think that she should have a kid, not being married at all. And so
Right.
then she comes back, hangs herself in the room, in the whole, like, you know, I want my kid sort of fit, and her kid dies. That was the first thing. You know, her kid ends up crashing in a carriage into the marsh and sinking and dying, and so she hangs herself, and hence all of this. But then why?
Well, and don't forget though, the guilt is that the parents, the adopted parents, were also in that carriage, and they saved themselves, and the kid died. Right? They apparently got out,
Yeah.
and that's why she was so pissed.
Yeah, and the kid died.
Yeah.
Little different in the other versions, but yeah, that's essentially the story.
Okay.
So then why this mechanic?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't make sense of it. So, I mean, she's just haunting the children of the living because of her pettiness. That's what we're to get out of it.
And she's going to kill.
No one deserves a child if I can't have a child. Is that the message?
I guess that's what they're doing. But then why does somebody have to see her first? You know?
Yeah.
And
Like
why is
they set up a rule, and
Yeah.
then they don't? Yeah. And I'm not comfortable not understanding that. And sometimes I'm comfortable not understanding things. This is one of those where it's like, it just doesn't make sense. I'm thinking maybe too hard about it.
Well, and I guess maybe we're thinking too hard about it, but why in this town of other people, other adults, plenty of kids, they're obviously doing their best to shy away from anything having to do with this woman, and making sure they can do whatever to not see her, essentially. But I don't know how they can prevent that. We do find out that what's his role? Like the town's solicitor, I guess, who's the one who's been in charge of the estate. Otherwise, when Arthur comes to see him, he refuses to help and says you should just leave. And
Here's
all
a
of this
wee
good stuff.
envelope of paperwork to satisfy your needs.
Yeah, now go
Please
away.
be on your way.
Meanwhile, we find out that he has locked his daughter in the basement. This is the one that burns up later, because he is so afraid of the woman in black getting her. But I mean, as people who live in this community, and this has been happening for decades, I don't know. It just seems like they would have some sense that she can work around basements and things like that.
Yeah.
Like that's where I run into some stumbling blocks with kind of the mechanics of this particular ghost.
Yeah. And you know, all of that is to say, like, it sounds like I feel like maybe it sounds like we're being hypercritical on it. And I for my part, I enjoyed my time with this movie. Like, I really felt like the mood was really great and cool. And I think Danny Ratz does a great job kind of headlining this thing. And Kieran Hines is always a treat to see in the movie. And I love that he's the only guy with a car. Like, there's some good stuff going on in this movie, the setting, the vibe, everything. And so I think the reason it's easy to point out this mechanic is because it stands out as a thing that feels unfinished to me in the story. And I don't know if If that, having never read the book, I don't know if that's like it. It sounds like there are some choices they made in this adaptation from the book that may have that may have hurt the mechanic of the ghost rather than helped it.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's an odd mechanic in however you look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly is the mechanic in all of the other versions as well. I all of that aside, I mean, there are interesting elements, and Kieran Hines, you mentioned, he's the rich landowner who also lives in town. He befriends Arthur on the train as Sam Daly. And we do find out that he and his wife, Janet McTeer plays his wife Elizabeth, they also had a kid who also died. But I did think, and this was something I enjoyed in this version, that he has kind of taken this mindset of denial and kind of like, oh, these townspeople are crazy. Like,
Yeah, they're all rubes. They don't
they're such
understand.
they're such little people. Like, I've got this car, I'm so smart. And he's kind of in this put himself into this place of total denial of what has happened, and doesn't and he likely could have given Arthur some warnings. And that was an interesting element of the story that I liked with the way that Sam and his interactions, and particularly his wife. I always liked Janet McTeer.
Yeah.
That was an interesting element of it, the way that played. What did you think of that?
Well, I agree. I think it's really interesting, and it is a nice way to separate them as a couple, also having experienced the same loss, and it makes the rest of the townspeople, lean in toward kind of groupthink or cultish behavior, right? The fact that they gather on the street, they to try and get the guy out. They're much angrier than Kieran Hines and wife. Like they just, it feels like they're dealing with at a different level. And I think it's nice to see how clearly and kind of effortlessly separated they can make our kind of enabling character of Kieran Hines without making him look like just another townsperson. I thought it was smart writing for that character. It was just generally smart writing for the character.
Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah.
You mentioned the causeway, and I completely agree. One of the most fascinating film locations that I have seen in recent years. It is a real causeway on the island out there is the Osea Island, and it is this little road that kind of goes out there. The causeway is this road that goes through this marsh, and you have to make sure you're timing it with the tides, because you can very easily get caught if the tide comes in and you're on it, and you're not far enough along. Likewise, it's a very, very foggy area, and I think that whole thing lent such a unique look to this whole thing. It was so haunting and foreboding. It just like I guess it's Susan Hill wrote the original book. And it's very, I don't know if she patterned it off of this particular one that they filmed on, but it's essentially it. And they filmed all of the films using this causeway. So clearly it was a location that worked really well for all of these. So
it's a great example of things that, when you talk about things that I stop and think about versus things that I don't. I did note how, like, I wondered how it works when the tide comes in and water covers this road. How does the road remain drivable when the area on either side of the road is just this deep marsh of mud and bog? Like, what is it about the windiness of this road that is stone or something that doesn't turn to muck? It's fascinating to me that this, and I know these places exist. Like, I get it. I find myself really lingering on how fascinating this location is.
Yeah, I don't know what goes into actually making a causeway like this.
Yeah,
that is what's really interesting. Is like, I don't know if I have a clear understanding myself, but it's interesting. Like, did they have to? Was it just? Assuming it's just a lot of construction in dumping a lot of materials in the marsh and then firming it up with enough material to kind of strengthen it so that it actually stays and doesn't get washed away. But
It is. It's fascinating.
yeah, yeah, really, really, really interesting. Very creepy.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yep. The what else was I going to say?
Well,
this was a Hammer film. Did you notice that? I
I
think
did.
it's
I
actually
didn't.
the first time we've talked about any Hammer film on our show.
I almost opened with that. I almost opened with a Hammer Time joke. I did. Yes, it's a Hammer film, a new Hammer film. You're not accustomed to talking about Hammer films that aren't, old exploitative.
Yeah, the whole Hammer had its successes in the 60s and then into the 70s, fading away by their last production was 1979. It was a remake of The Lady Vanishes, Hitchcock's film, with Elliot Gould and Sybil Shepherd. That was their last film, and the brand name was resurrected in 2007, and they had done a few things leading up to this one. But I know that since then it's gone through a lot of ups and downs and has been struggling to find success. But it has been releasing, I think since 2007, it's released 9 films.
Mm-hmm.
Most recent one was Dr. Jekyll in 2013, that one with Eddie Izzard.
Yes, I don't know that it did very
2023.
well.
I don't know if it did, but The Lodge, actually, that was a film that was I brought up as one of my list picks, and that was a Trailer Rewind film.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Jane Goldman wrote this
Mhm.
with Watkins. Interesting that Jane Goldman is. I happen to like other Jane Goldman films. Stardust was great, and Kick-Ass. I actually really enjoyed. Like, this is an interesting pen on this movie. What do you think of the script overall?
She's done a lot of work with. I think Matthew Vaughn. Maybe everything that Matthew Vaughn has done, she's worked on with him.
Yeah.
Are they married? No, Jonathan Ross is who she's married to, but I guess Matthew Vaughn is just her regular collaborator. I do like what she does here with the script. I think that there, like, we've talked about some of the changes and everything. I think some of it definitely feels like they're changing it for modern audiences to kind of update the mood and tone. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I still think that she did a good job. I actually like the grief story that we have with Radcliffe. That, I think, brought a nice tone already to the film from the start.
Well, to that point exactly. I feel like the grief story is one of the more intriguing elements of the film. Like, it gives a reliably believable backstory to this guy and why he's kind of focused on getting this job done because his livelihood is under threat and he has a child and he's doing it alone with Nanny. Like, it just feels like an appropriate angle for this character. I like it a lot.
Yeah. No. I think that it works. I think it works nicely. Yeah.
Let's see what else you got. We've got James Watkins. I'm with you. Haven't seen anything else that he's done.
Not very busy as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
I mean, this was, although the most recent film that he did, Speak No Evil, which is coming out soon, James McAvoy looks very creepy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very curious to check that one out. Have you seen the trailer for that?
No.
Well, watch it. It looks great. It's a holiday. A couple goes on holiday in the country and ending up kind of befriending a pair of other people who have a country house nearby, and they kind of come over, and it just gets super creepy from that point forward. It's a Blumhouse film, so
I'll take it.
Yeah.
All right. Cinematography, Tim Maurice Jones, moody, environmental. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think that it works. It fits the vibe. I think that's the tone that they're going for. It is a very dark film, but to that end, I think that Um,
Well,
it fits again. It fits the vibe.
and it really fits the like sinister mold, right? Because we
Yeah.
had, you know, it's this whole idea that there is such like fun contrast in this gothic house between light and dark, the things you can see and the things you can't. Like it's another one of those movies where you feel like if you turn on the house lights, then it's just half walls because everything is so dark in the corners. And eerie stuff going on. I really like that. At no point did I believe that they had lit the house with anything other than candles. I thought that was really effective. Knowing, you know, they of course had some incredibly creative lighting. It does feel like candlelight to me,
Yeah.
and I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and
Moody,
they
good
also
use. I mean, the fog was awesome too. The fog that rolls in around the house and you know, all the way to the very end when they kind of disappear into the fog on the train station. So
well, that's you know, movies with fog. I really enjoy the way that you can play with that, and there was a fun moment in here where you've got a shot of Arthur as he's hearing these sounds in the fog of this child, like the carriage crash into the mud and everyone screaming and dying and everything. You hear all of that, and you see him in the fog looking, and then we cut to what we think is a POV as he's kind of looking out into the fog trying to see anything, and suddenly he comes running forward into the fog, like past the camera, and we're like, oh, like I thought I
yeah,
was seeing his point of view, but no, it was just another shot. So the way you can really play with that, I think, really kind of makes you very uneasy.
I think if anybody who's listening to the show knows you have a list of your favorite M's in composers. I'm sure Marco Beltrami's at the top of it, right? Favorite M's. Have we talked about that before? I'm sure maybe that's new.
It might be new. I don't have any
Okay.
favorite M's, but Marco Beltrami is, I think he's a very effective composer for films like this. Like he's done some good music in a lot of,
Yeah.
a variety of projects.
Arguably the best thing about the movie Silent Night, rough sailing.
Oh dear. Yeah.
Yes, he's done a lot of great stuff. I mean, man,
A lot of
149 credits. This
a lot
guy.
of interesting genre film
Totally.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, what else you got? Anything hot you want to talk about as we wrap up?
I think that's about it.
That's all I got.
All right. Let me find my page. Well, we will be right back, but first our credits.
The next reel is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Muted, Oriole Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at the-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. All right, I feel like we've been talking about sequels and remakes and prequels and postmakes for a while, but what do we have to learn that we might have missed?
Well, we already talked about the 1989. Well, the book. I mean, the book came out in
1983?
Early 80s. Then the TV movie came out in 1989. There was a BBC radio broadcast of it in 93 and another one in 2004. In 2012, there was this film. There was also a stage play of it that ran on at the West End, and it was the second longest running play in the history of the West End after The Mousetrap. So very,
Wow.
very popular stage play over there. And this is like how prominent the book is in British society. The book is commonly used as set text in British schools as part of the national curriculum for English. It's recommended for Key Stage 3 and above, with the paperback edition most frequently used by students. The novel is the subject of GCSE English literature questions from the Edexcel and Edequas examination boards.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
I guess,
fantastic.
is it like a British Grapes of Wrath? Like,
Yeah.
that's I find that to be very interesting.
Me too.
Last but not least, there was a sequel to the book and novelization of the script for the second movie, The Woman in Black, Angel of Death, written by Martin Waits. It was published in 2013 and the U.S. 2014, and then, of course, made into the 2015 film The Woman in Black, Angel of Death. Did you end up watching the sequel?
I did not. Did you?
I did. It's kind of frustrating. It's not great, but they do some interesting things with it. It shifts forward into World War II, and now we have a woman who cares for kids. Several of them take a group of kids from London, where it's being bombed, into the countryside to this house to take care of the kids. And of course, they're in this house where a woman wants to kill kids. And so there are elements that are interesting and that work throughout the film, but there are a lot of things that don't work. And that's what's frustrating, because it's like, gosh, I feel like you were on the verge of doing something really interesting with it. And unfortunately, it just kind of stumbled. And that's even more frustrating because Susan Hill, the original author, actually was involved in crafting this story.
Ooh.
And so, yeah, it's kind of frustrating. But there is interesting stuff in it, and that's why it's. I kind of feel like it's at least worth a watch, because I do think that there's just an interesting element of the whole angle they took.
It didn't break things like Sinister 2.
No, well, other than the fact that the Woman in Black is still hanging out at the house. I mean,
Yeah.
we kind of know she was still around at the end of
Yeah.
the first film. She's still here, and she's still killing people, and yeah.
Okay. Well, but did it do any good at the awards season?
Yeah, it had 5 wins with 14 other nominations. At the Saturn Awards, it was nominated for Best Horror or Thriller Film, but lost to The Cabin in the Woods. At the Empire Awards, it won Best Horror Film and was nominated for Best British Film, but lost to Sightseers. And then, of course, the reason we're here, the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards. It was nominated for Best Wide Release Film, but again lost to The Cabin in the Woods. Daniel Radcliffe, nominated for Best Actor, but lost to Liam Neeson in The Grey. And the score, you mentioned Marco Beltrami's score. It was nominated for Best Score, but lost to the creepy stuff going on in Sinister. So now we've come to the end of this series. We've talked about these 5 films. We talked about The Grey. We talked about
Kill List.
We talked about Kill List. We talked about Sinister, Sleep Tight, and now The Woman in Black.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards nominees for Best Actor?
Man. It's I feel like it's a tough one. I mean, I can see I liked Sleep Tight a lot. Right. And I liked Sinister a lot. I think Ethan Hawke is an easy win for me, as a charismatic actor in this particular role. And I think I probably land on Neeson in terms of the overall challenge that as an actor that he had for this movie, as the challenge that he had communicating the emotional journey from being completely lost at the beginning of the movie to being found at the end, even as he goes into a losing fight with nature. I think he just nails it for me. So this is a harder one, because I found something to really like in all the movies that we watched. Like I think there's something really great in all of them, but The Grey stands out for me.
Yeah, and it's my favorite film of the list. I think Liam Neeson was just so he carried that sense of grief in the film, and then was able to kind of turn that into that strength that I found so fascinating as a character in the film. So it's hard to see a different angle for me, but I mean, there were some really interesting performances on here outside of that. I kind of am torn. Like, if I were to say what would be, if I took Liam Neeson out, where would I land? And I'm really torn between our lead actors for Kill List, Neil Mescal and Luis Tosar in Sleep Tight. Like, I'm kind of torn between those two as my next choice.
Yeah, for me, I guess I think it would be Sleep Tight if that's the choice. But I have to say, I mean, this was a series of surprises for me because so many of the movies I hadn't seen. And
Yeah.
what a huge relief that I don't feel like there's any movie on this list that is not recommendable.
Yeah, no, I think they're all fun films, creepy films. I'm not going to recommend them to just people blindly. I mean, it's
Well,
definitely
I've
going to be
already
somebody.
recommended all of them to your mother.
uh, well, that'd be interesting to see where she would go with this list. But yeah, but
Next
yeah,
week, your mom and my mom will be hosting the podcast.
but they'll be talking about these 5 films
Yes.
all over again. Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, it's a fun list of films, and I
Yeah.
do enjoy the performances. Like I didn't think there was a bad performance in the bunch.
No, for sure.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, then I guess. Oh no, you're still going.
That's right. I have a thing. All right. How to do at the box office? Does it make any money?
Watkins had $32 million to make his Ghost Story, which is $44.1 million in today's dollars. The movie opened February 3rd, 2012, opposite Chronicle, Big Miracle, and as we discussed a few episodes ago, the very limited release of Kill List. This landed in the number 2 spot behind Chronicle and went on to earn $54 million domestically and $74 million internationally for a total gross of $128.9 million in today's dollars. All told, the film landed with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $1.4 million, making it the most successful of this series in adjusted profits per finished minute. But Sleep Tight is actually the winner when it comes to the profit to cost ratio.
Boom. That's where the money's at.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah. Fun film. Fun
film
list. I'm glad we got some horror on here and looking at actors. And yeah, I had a great time. And I definitely enjoyed this film. I mean, it's a fun, creepy one.
Yeah, me too, for sure. Again, for mood alone, this film really excels. And so that lets us into our next series.
Yes, I can't believe it, but we are gonna. Yes, yeah, blah blah blah. Yes, we'll be right back for our ratings. But first, here's the trailer for next week's movie, kicking off our final series of this season. Looking at the 2023 DGA Awards for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in a Theatrical Feature Film nominees, Martin McDonagh's The Banshees of Inisherin.
I have talked to a number of people in just social circles, and when I tell them that we're about to do this next set of movies, they say they absolutely hated The Banshees of Inisherin, more than one person.
Wow.
And I find that so disappointing.
I feel like Martin McDonagh has a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like 3 Billboards gets a lot of hate.
I love 3 Billboards.
Yeah.
Dang it. All right.
Strange thing, yeah.
Letterboxd Andy, what are you going to do for this movie? Good vibe equal good star?
I definitely enjoy the film. It's creepy. It's, I think there are ways it could have been better, but I do think that they make an effective ghost story film here. I'm going to say 3.5 stars and a heart.
I'm stuck on this the 3 or 4 stars. I think it's a 3-star and a heart for me. I think that's where ultimately I ended up. It is a good, competent film, and it heavies up on some tropes in some of the more intense kind of Act 2 to Act 3 sequences. And I wish there were more bigger events, horror events. But overall, a really good film.
We didn't talk about it, but I gotta say, I really enjoy in this film the way that they play with darkness and shadows, and how sometimes you think that there's like a shadow behind Radcliffe, and then suddenly it moves, and you realize, oh, that's the woman in black back there.
Yeah, right.
The one that I thought was actually the best, and they didn't do it as a jump scare. It was so, like, this is what I wanted all the time. When he goes down to the cemetery, and there's a tracking shot as the camera's tracking right to left through the trees and just kind of the muck and everything else in this kind of ratty old forest as he kind of walks down there. And the whole foreground is out of focus. And then suddenly it passes her.
Yeah. I loved
and
that. I loved
and
it.
we settle with just like a piece of her veil kind of on the right side of the frame, but
Yeah.
that was, and the music does something. It's like a very soft like tone shift there. That was so effective. Like they had moments like that throughout the film that I just cheered for, because like
Mhm.
that's what I was excited about. Seeing those little moments that showed that they were developing kind of those ghostly elements in the film,
Yeah.
very effectively.
And that the ghost is always there, right? I think that's where those are useful. There's another one where he kind of starts falling asleep at the table and the door opens behind him way across the hall and she approaches him and then it changes to her POV behind his head. I thought that was very effective. Like that
Yeah.
could have come off as kind of a campy choice, but I thought it was very, very effective.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess when we say jump scares, like they did a lot of stuff that wasn't jump scares that was
Mhm.
actually more effective. It
And I
almost
wanted
makes me want to
more of
bump my
that.
rating up. Almost wants me to bump my rating up a half point, but I'm not going to.
All
Leave it
right.
at 3.5. All right.
All right,
Well, we
3.5
can
is
find
good.
our ratings over at thenextreel.com, where this is going to be at 3.25. So we'll round that up to 3.5 and a heart. You can find me there at Soda Creek Film. You can find Pete there at Pete Wright. So what did you think about The Woman in Black? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Hop into the show talk channel over in our Discord community, where we will be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
Our conversation begins. Woof.
you do not sound good.
That's rough. The Woman in Black.
Blick.
Blick.
Growing up British was being made to watch this in your English class at the tender age of 11. Wow.
Creepy.
Oh, dear. Oh, I've got mine.
All right, I'll do this one.
Who are you doing?
Mark Wasmer. It's a
right.
longer one.
All right. Letterbox giveth Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
Okay. I have a short one that has trivia
Oh,
that I think you of all people might find interesting.
okay.
All right. 3.5 stars from Nakul. James Watkins' The Woman in Black was better than I expected. Quite an underrated and old school gothic horror movie. It's very familiar and follows a lot of typical horror tricks, but it's effectively made and beautifully composed, and everything about the ambiance and mood feels rich with chilling atmosphere and mounting tension. Also, I just found out that in the 1989 version, Arthur was played by Adrian Rollins, the actor who played James Potter.
Oh, that's funny. I would not have pulled that.
Yes. I think
genius.
that's really interesting. That is a funny bit of weird stunt casting. The review that follows it immediately after is from Mikkel Strangren, who says, "That's not the train to Hogwarts, Harry," which I also think is very funny. All right,
Yeah,
what do you got?
had I just clicked on him after I watched the movie, I didn't click
Yeah.
on the actor, but yeah, I see that now. He sure is James
Isn't
Potter.
Isn't that funny?
That is awesome. What an odd little connection
Yeah.
there, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I went with a review that was, I decided I'm going to sort by earliest review. I picked the very first review
Oh,
on
fascinating.
Letterboxd of this film, January 13th, 2012. So Mark Wasmer, 4 stars with a heart, must have like seen it at a preview screening or as a critic or something. The Woman in Black is very rich in style with its muted color palettes, misty landscapes, and blue-wash moonlight scenarios. It's very much a modern day through back to the. It's very much a modern day through back to the style. It's very. No, maybe I shouldn't have picked this one. It's very much a modern day through back to the style of the Hammer horror movies from the 1950s. I'm pretty sure those deer antler and deliriers were a nod to the old horror films where they were compulsory in every creepy house on a hill. As you would expect, being a horror movie, the film is dark, beautifully dark, in fact, not in the sense that you can't see what's happening on screen. No, dark in a very foreboding, atmospheric, somebody lurking over your shoulder type of way. Scenes are framed as such that you can't help but scan the screen, looking in the background to make sure you're not missing something. The lighting is perfect, just enough to capture the environment whilst leaving those dark corners intact where anything could happen. The sound is amazing, perfectly capturing the moment of a creaking floorboard, a whisper of the wind, and bringing with it tension, suspense, and the threat of something scary. And when the big scares come, they come with audible vengeance. When watching The Woman in Black, I was reminded of those videos you find on video sharing websites, the ones that your friends send you to and tell you to concentrate on a task. So you do, and then after a while, something jumps up on screen and scares the bejesus out of you. Well, that's what this movie is like. Once the film has established its direction, the fun begins. Slowly at first, but eventually it becomes relentless just when your heart is settled. Bang, here's another and another. In one word, scary. Radcliffe as Arthur Kipps was brilliant and carried the film with ease. There you go.
I like it. I love the vibe of you're focusing on a task and all of a sudden something jumps up at you. That's the entire vibe of this movie. He just wants to get some legaling done.
I just want to do my legal paperwork.
Thank you so much, Letterboxd. The ghost of Letterboxd. Boo.
All right.
Oh, Andy.
Should we do a post show?
We should post show it. Hurry.
All right.
Before your voice gives out.
Before I'm talking like this.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, Danny Ratz.
He's all right.
He's all right.
Casting probably paid off, judging by the box office receipts, and he's not bad. No, I think he's fine.
Yeah, keeping it appropriately PG-13. The attic that he stayed in, I actually really liked that twist. Not a twist, but the fact that he's staying in the attic that ties the three girls that die in the beginning to the innkeepers. Like that was a nice little horrific twist, especially because they left like the headless dolls in the room.
Yeah,
there's a lot of fetishization of antique toys in the movie.
That monkey that is like compulsively, that was like, no child should have that toy.
And there's another one that's playing the violin, right? I didn't care for that either.
I say that, and of course I would absolutely buy that if I could.
Yes, and put it in your front yard at Halloween. This, I think, gives you a whole new tableau.
They actually, They actually, in the second film, the sequel, they actually still have those toys, but it's even creepier because just imagine them sitting up in the attic for 25 years. Pieces are gone. Some of them, it's just the plastic shell that was inside, and they're doing their things. That was a very effective, creepy bit of the sequel.
Nice. All right. So are you saying I should watch the sequel?
It's fun. I mean, it still is creepy. And like I said, they do some things with it that I enjoyed. I wish that it was better, but
yeah. Okay. Atmosphere
also
and surface
like the marshland setting. Yes.
Marshlands is a win. A lot of kids dying. I guess.
Yeah.
I appreciated that touch. I think that would get noted and altered in 2024, especially for a PG-13. Yeah, I mean, there were some when the girl lights herself on fire. That's one that I don't think we would get for a PG-13.
I don't know. I think
you don't think
it was none of it was done that dark. I don't know if any of that would change that much for today. Yeah. Like it's not all like right. It's. I mean, it's dark, but we're not seeing it as much, you know.
Yeah, but that's the only one that you see this girl go up in flames. Like she actively kills herself. Everybody else is like post-death, and I think that's fine.
I just don't know if that would be.
Well, I mean, you just have a real vibe for killing children.
That's true.
When they misbehave. gotta figure out what Jeanette wants. Also, it sort of doesn't matter because she's sticking with being petty. Yeah, actually, that we talked. That's the point, right?
That was our
Isn't
whole
that the
balance.
point? That's the problem. Um, a lot of rushing, but Rats never goes for the tackle. Come on, man. Well
Yeah.
played. He should have gone for the tackle.
So you didn't think it had too many jump scares. A little more variety in them might have improved things.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
and
possible we were saying the same thing.
yeah, it is possible.
Yeah.
And I do think the more I thought about it, it's like I do think there are jump scares, but I also think that they play with like I was forgetting about those fantastic uses of kind of the shadow play and how suddenly the black or the woman in black is back there. She's just you see her moving in the shadows. And I really liked that. And I don't think those were as obvious for the jump scares. So those were nice.
Yeah. Lean in, you'll end up in the Matrix sequels train station.
Oh my gosh, yes. Eventually.
Yeah. Everybody does.
Yeah. Sounds like you guys wanted a Raimi type of ending. Dead kids just tormenting and pulling them apart at the end. Hell yeah. Give me that.
Yes.
Well,
I think,
but it's interesting because the other films all end that way. So,
yeah.
and the book apparently is fairly dark. I mean, he stays alive, but his wife and kid get killed. I don't know. This was like, of the endings, the most, even though they're all dead, it still was a very happy ending.
So kind of anodyne, right? Non-committal to me, I think, too. But happy ending is the way to put it.
Like, I would love to have seen him and his son walking toward his wife. Like, oh, thank God we can finally be reunited. And then suddenly her form just changes
Yeah.
and like falls apart. And it's the woman in black. And she's like,
Yeah.
and she grabs them and like,
And then she
yeah.
gives him a big raspberry.
that's what we need, more raspberries.
We saw the same movie, I'm sure.
I think the ending works, kind of works because it's ridiculous that Arthur keeps sticking around as all these kids are dying unless he is warped somewhat. Well, but that also takes into account buying into ghosts. And I think he's having a hard time buying into that. Like he wants to be serious. And it's like, no, okay, people say that this woman appears and a kid dies. Like, yeah, I mean, if somebody told me that too, I'm like, come on, you're full of it. I'd be hard pressed to get to a point where I was buying into it. So I can see him struggling with that. And when people are accusing him of, you're the reason my kid is dead, it's like, well, it was a fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't know that I have anything to add. I took it as Arthur interacted with her so much that she attached. That's interesting. I think that's as plausible as any other.
Well, and yeah, that's interesting because is it only because he's the new man in town and she's just like, oh, finally some new blood around here I can hook up with. And so she's like kind of staying with him all the time. Like, because I mean, it seems like she's not largely appearing for the townsfolk. Like they're all being so cautious and stuff that she's obviously they've had kids and kids have died and stuff, but it just seems like he gets more from her than anyone else has. Like no one else has multiple visits from her, and particularly in such a small time span.
I think the R-rated version of this adds a cult element to the town because they'd likely murder or really punish Danny Rats, especially if he's bumbling about into endangering their kids. You know, I mean, in terms of armchair director's cutting, I could totally see that, especially every time they're in the car and get stopped on the road out to the causeway. Like you can totally see somebody's going to overturn that car and light it on fire. And
well, that's actually it's an interesting element because if I lived in this town, I'd probably move. But that aside, I think okay, there is. If I were somebody in the town, I'd say, okay, get out there, get the paperwork, bring it back. So as soon as this guy comes back, we can just give it to him, send him on his way. So, like if I were the town solicitor, like say, here's everything. That's your job. You don't need to do any more. Off you go, and send him on his way. Like don't let him linger. Right.
Yeah. Right.
And or hey, take some shovels out there to the Causeway Road and start digging that thing up and like make it so it's impassable. I mean, there are ways that they could.
They didn't commit.
Yeah.
They never commit to the bit. Yeah. All right. Hammer tried to do the Marvel thing with their logo. I noticed. Yeah, I actually thought about that. That's interesting.
Weirdly, it's much less that in the second
Yeah.
one. Only a few years later, they must have realized that didn't play very well. The grief story was probably was more novel at the time. Since 2012, horror has been obsessed with stuff. Yes.
Is it really just since 2012, you think? I mean, I feel like we've been watching a lot of older horror movies on Sitting in the Dark, and there's still a lot of that grief stuff in there.
I think grief just plays into horror films in general, and in particular ghost stories. I think there's always an element of grief because it's always about this lost person who can't get through things, and you'll see a lot of that in a lot of ghost stories.
Yeah.
You're right. Speak No Evil is a remake. And it's a foreign remake too. I think it's Dutcher somewhere. So
I need to watch that trailer.
Oh, and you've seen the original. You said the original sure is dark. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Good use of fog. Yes, and you agree. Liam Neeson seems like a clear winner of the list. So
yeah.
All right.
Nice work if you can get it.
Good show. Well, thanks everybody.
Thanks for hanging out, Brian.
We'll be back next week to kick off our final series of the season. Cannot believe we're already here.
I know. And at some point, what are we going to do about our next season picks? Like as soon as I finish my job, are we going to do like a member episode where we surprise each other?
Either it doesn't have to be an episode, but we can just do a streaming thing if people want to tune in.
If people want to hang out. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Good. Then let's do that.
Okay.
You heard it here first. Thanks, everybody.
And I'm ending the stream. Bye, Brian. We'll see you next time.